Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 58. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Today's guest, we just talked off camera for like 29 minutes. So this is going to be a crazy show. Anyways, I'm not even going to prolong the intro. Name and who you are.
So I'm Gursh Bal. I am the co-CEO and co-founder of Zeno Renewables. I'm a father, music lover. I like sports, and I'm somebody who wants to save the planet so that we have it for future generations.
Awesome intro. How do you even, when did you start feeling that? When did you know you want to save the planet?
Wow, that's a good question. It was early. Now, there's some of you that are going to be listening to this that know me and some of you that don't, especially being in the environment side of the coin. I'm a car guy. Like, I'm drop a gear down, put your clutch and drop a gear down and hit the gas as hard as possible. And my preference is a boxer engine. So like a boxer engine that you typically see in a Porsche 911, that type of car.
Yep.
But on the other side of the coin, I'm very empathetic. I grew up with a mother who was an animal rights advocate, and that piece was a major piece in my growth as an individual. So I feel from an undertone perspective, I knew my entire life that this is the direction I wanted to go in. When the reality set in was when I realized how bad cars were for the environment. So it was right around the time, I think I was like 21, 22, and I started getting into this level of awareness as an individual that I didn't have previously. And that's when it really started hitting home that like, oh crap, all these things that I really like are actually not that great for the future. And that was probably one of the most painful transitions for my life, because I used to be that kid that taught myself everything on YouTube, but watched everything on YouTube as well. And I used to go from watching, a couple car videos a week to completely shutting that piece of my life out, knowing that I had to kind of rip that Band-Aid off and focus on the future. Yep. And everybody has those, right? Like kind of people like chocolate having to give that up. Then maybe that was the thing for me, is like giving cars up was a really hard transition. And that was the kind of the nail in the coffin that my mom was slowly building as I was a child. So death to the things that aren't good for us, I suppose.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's so cool. The gist of the show is I like the guest to go back to a time, go back to childhood, go back to school, university, junior high, elementary. The idea is just kind of go back to a time when things started to click, how you grew up, how your parents raised you, what you're interested in. So you kind of go back to, for me, I have a bad memory as a kid, but I remember certain things, grade 6, grade 7, things started to come alive for me. So just go back as far as you want to go, where you're born, how you were brought up, and then we'll just kind of weave our way to what you're up to today.
Yeah. And it's a really good place to start in terms of trying to figure out who you are, is trying to go back in time and kind of get in that time machine, right? I find that time is so honest with everything in your life about how much of a contradictory person you can be, because the person that you are right now is not the person that you were yesterday. And if you pay attention to time, it actually helps you build into a better person overall. For me, I was a weird kid, man, and not by choice. I wasn't weird in the terms of like, oh, we don't want to hang out with Gursh or stuff like this. My environment made me weird. So I was from England. I moved to Canada when I was 6. I had a mother who was English, or British, sorry. Like there's a difference there. So she's East Indian, but British. And then my dad was from India, and he had moved to England when he was in his 30s to meet my mom. Okay. Now here's the kicker. They didn't speak the same language. My mom only spoke English and my dad only spoke Punjabi. So he's from the northern part of India, really resilient group of individuals that are all just farmers, super cool roots. The culture there is a little bit Buddhist-like. Okay. It's about women empowerment, animal empowerment, being a balance with the earth. So even from him, I had a significant amount of influence. My dad is this guy who's like, knows no bounds. He went from not having electricity in his house until he was a teenager, to becoming a bus conductor to help feed his family of God knows how many people. I always lose track, but he had like $25 a month. That was what he had to make sure that his family was fed. Yep. To figuring out how to convince this lady that didn't speak the same language as him to meet up with him, and convinced her to get him to move to England. Then he met her and then charmed her into a position where he's like, hey, actually, let's just move to Canada. And
like, how does that even happen? Do you guys talk about it as a family?
Yeah.
Like, is it like a running thing?
Between my parents and I, it totally is. Like, I'm very much in a fortunate position in life where I have that distance that I can reflect and I can understand what's happened to me and why things are happening to me and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing to people. I can look at it from that lens. And that's afforded me that level of conversation with them that I haven't had, that I haven't had, that other people might not have. Life's not easy. The hustle and bustle of being able to keep up with bills, being able to satisfy the needs of a spouse, maybe your children, can create this nasty, vicious cycle that, oh my gosh, one day I'm 70 and my life is now over. I don't necessarily have those forces upon me. So why I'm using that as a representation of my life is that I have this opportunity to speak to my parents that my other family members don't. And with them, when I ask them these questions, they almost just make it sound like it was always just meant to be. Like my dad's this guy that's like really big on destiny. I don't know where I sit on that stuff, to be fair with you, but he's very much like, my path was laid out in front of me and I'm just following it. And he's very much like a flow state guy, but he's not one of those people that gets into a flow state. He's just always in a flow state. And my mom is this other crazy force that keeps on pushing him in the direction of staying on his goals, but also satisfying some of her own goals as well. She's a very strong woman, very driven by morality and values, and really hammer those home with us as children, like not leaving the house if your shirt's not pressed, or interesting things like that, cutlery on the table, no elbows, 20 bites when you're eating food, all these little interesting things. So that's what I meant by what I said earlier on, is that it was constantly being ingrained as me as I was getting older, until I fell off that cliff and I put the hammer in the nail of like, okay, I need to do this.
Would you say it was kind of like a different upbringing? Like, I'm sure you'd go to your buddies' houses and their things would be different. Would they know that your house has got a different tone to it? Like, could they see it?
I was lucky. My house was like the loving house. Like people would come over to my house, and I had friends who were having troubles like with their family members, and they would sleep at my house. My parents would feed them. My parents were happy to have them there. They weren't just like, oh, this is an inconvenience. They're like, oh, Gursh, get out of your bed. You're going to go sleep on the couch. This friend is actually going to get your bed. And then my friends would be tripping out. They're like, no. Like, I'll sleep on the couch. Like, you don't have to. Like, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Ball, kind of thing. Yeah. For me, they were just mom and dad, right? But they were very loving. And I lived in a really dynamic house. So having that British upbringing and then having the Indian upbringing, I tried every type of food in the world. Yeah, I can imagine. Before I kind of got out into the world. And I think that food is an amazing connection that you can make with individuals, determining on based on how you interact with it, right? If you respect it, you're an individual that eats every morsel that's put in front of you, and you respect that food, you respect that plate, you wash that plate properly, and you have that consistency all the way throughout that relationship in everything that you do. That really defines who you can be as a person. So that was a connection thing in my house. Is friends knew they were coming over, they were going to get fed, and that if they wanted to stay, they were more than welcome, and I was probably going to get kicked out of my bed. So it was a very unique time for you. Totally. And I would go to my other friends' houses, and I'd be analyzing. I mean, every kid does. Like, oh, this is new. It's like your first version of travel. Isn't getting on a plane and going somewhere. It's going to your friends' houses that you haven't been to. True. How are they living? What do they got in their house? And there was good situations and there was bad situations, right? Like you would go to certain friends' houses and everything was dirty and there just wasn't food in the fridge. And you're like, okay, this is not cool, right? And those are the people that I always kept closer. I don't want to say the names of those individuals, but they're still in my life. And those are the people that I always, try to, how do I put this? When you hug somebody, the best thing that you can do is put your heart close to theirs. That's what a real hug is. And these are those individuals in my life that when I hug them, our hearts are close. And those are the guys that I always would look out for and keep them as close as possible to ensure that, they got that leg up that their own family wasn't willing to give them. Is that all from your mom, or is there a combination between like that thought process specifically? Or is that is it both of them, or is your mom the driver for you to feel and think that way? No, it's both of them. Like the hospitality, I think everybody has a version of it. It's either good or bad, right? My parents were both good and hospitable, but they had different versions of it. My mom was, I want somebody to feel comfortable. So this is where you get to sit. Here's your blanket. Here's some water. Here's like food and that side. My dad, on the other hand, was, I want you to feel loved. And in almost like I guess less of an environmental way in terms of what's going on around you, and more of like a conversation piece, like how are you doing? It's so good to see you, those types of things. And he would really lean into conversations right out of the gate and try to make somebody feel as welcome as possible without any hesitation. So he would be jumping off that cliff that people get stuck on of like, oh, should I say this or shouldn't I say this? He would just get right into things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting you say that, because off camera, right away, and nobody does this to me. Off camera, you're like, so, before we start, I want to ask you this. Like, you came out of the gate with me quickly and just like, either just to get a line on me or just like something different. And obviously that's who you are and how you operate, but you watched it from.
Yeah. And I'm not unique. Everybody tries to, how do I put this? Actions get a lot of weight, a ton of weight. They always say actions speak louder than words. Yeah, maybe, but you need to have the words first, right? And everybody has a different tool. I also believe in action. One of the things that Kai, who's my co-founder at Zeno, and I do a lot is try to give up our time for other people to help them and run marathons for charity. And that's an interesting story as well too. Like, I was in a motorcycle accident probably 4 or 5 years ago now.
Okay.
And what happened was, following that motorcycle accident, was pretty interesting. So I had torn ligaments in my ankle, completely smashed up my knee, couldn't really walk. But that was early when the business had started, and I had no choice. So after 6 days, I was on crutches, going out to site, making sure that things were going properly, making sure that people had work to do and they weren't sitting at home because of an interesting decision or an interesting situation that I got in. Yeah. I chose to be on a motorcycle. I chose to ride in Calgary.
Yeah.
Both situations aren't necessarily ideal, though motorcycles are great. Yeah. And Kai was in Europe at the time. And once he got back and he started understanding what was going on with me, he actually challenged me to do a marathon. So
as you're broken.
Yeah. He's like, hey, do you want to do a marathon? I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And it was interesting. The first one was here in Calgary, and I finished.
Which one did you? What was the race? Like the Mother's Day or the Stampede? It
was the official Calgary Marathon, which happens in May. I forget what date it was, like May 23rd or something like that. And it was probably one of the most crazy experiences of my life. And that was me as an individual who's inclined to utilize words, now having to show up with action. I need to get from line A to line B, and I need to do it in a way that allows me to want to take this opportunity that's been given to me and use it as value. That's how I went into it. Little did I know what I was going to go through during those. It took me like over 5 hours. The ankle injury kicked in, the knee injury kicked in, a shoulder injury from soccer kicked in, and then all the other demons of like everything that was going on in my life came right to the surface, and I had to deal with them. The marathon, the physical side of it is whatever, right? Like you're having to move your body in a certain way. It's the mental side that you're having to experience for that period of time that's trying to defeat you to get you to stop. And at the end of the race, Kai comes up to me and he's got a beer in hand, and this guy's a beast, man. This guy's all action. And he's genetically gifted in so many different ways with kindness and so on and so forth, but physicality as well. And he has a beer for me. And then that moment, he pretty much puts his hand out and he's like, you want to do 50? And we agreed to 50 marathons. So we've done 4 now.
No way.
Yeah. We've done pretty well time-wise. I think I knocked like an hour and a half off of my first one. So like just that action and proving that I could do it to myself really made a major difference in my life. But going back to what I opened this ramble with was words. Yeah. And I believe that my version of tools is words. And I believe to lead with words takes courage. So going back to what you were saying in regards to I'm one of the first people to ask you right out of the gate. Yeah. I feel that every single person that I know knows something that I don't. I believe it's Jim Carrey that says that, right? I kind of adopt that into my own mindset. And that if I don't choose to give the person across the table for me the time of the day, then I'm not worthy of their time, because it's an exchange between two individuals. And that's why I chose to ask you that and to lead with that courage and to ask you a question that might be uncomfortable for others.
That was really interesting. I knew you were going to be a different guy as soon as we sat down off camera, because you were very thoughtful, well-spoken, and leading with that question. I knew you weren't going to let this one flow by you. So
hey, no, I appreciate it.
It was good. It was cool.
Thank you. That's really kind of you.
So walk me through your lifestyle as a youngster. Like what you're into and kind of your path you're on. Obviously, you're kind of into cars.
Yeah.
But like, what else is going on? You're playing sports and doing your thing.
Yeah. I like going back to that statement that I said earlier on that I was a weirdo. So I grew up as a vegetarian. That's what forced me into being a weird kid. So when I had moved from England, we'd landed in Toronto where I have relatives, and then my parents were like, no, this isn't the place that we want to be. We want to be in Edmonton.
Do you know why? What was driving them to Edmonton? More family?
My mom was a nurse.
Okay.
So she was a nurse, and I believe a triage nurse and an emergency nurse in England. And she had visited Edmonton, and I'm guessing she visited Edmonton during the summer, which is a trap.
It's like bait and switch.
Yeah. If you're listening and you want to move to Canada, every city's amazing. Let's just put that out there first.
Yeah.
But if you're sensitive to weather, make sure you visit during the summer and winter if you can afford to. If not, just get here and then figure out where you want to be. Right, being anywhere in Canada is an amazing place to be.
Yeah.
But what it came down to for me as a kid is I landed in Alberta. And you landed in Edmonton of all places. Being a vegetarian was not cool. Like there was nothing to eat. There was like in terms of alternatives, it was like cardboard, like simulation meat that I learned to love. Like even when I have it now, I'm like, oh, this reminds me of childhood and it tastes like crap. But somebody's still out there making it. Yeah. But that's what made me the weird kid is that I'd be in elementary school and it would be that time of the year. So, pizza parties, awesome. And I'd be standing in the corner. Every single pizza that was ordered had ham on it or pepperoni on it. You see all these kids, and when you're a kid and you're standing on the sidelines and you're like 7, 8, 9, and you're like, oh, everybody's having this pizza party and I have to stand here because I can't eat this food because my parents have these rules and I respect my parents and I love my parents. And then I never really told my parents about it, right? I would just come home and then I would eat it, right? But that was my first real opportunity of understanding what it meant to have willpower. And I've always carried that through my life. I've never tried meat, fish, or eggs, and no judgment. Yep. Even in post-secondary, the way that I was raised, I worked at the keg. I ended up, flipping seafood on the saute, grilling steaks on the grill.
Crazy.
And even in that situation, everybody was kind of weirded out. They're like, hey, like you're the only person here that's a vegetarian. You've chosen not to work in the front of house. You've chosen to work in the kitchen of all places. Yeah. And on top of that, you're choosing not to eat meat. Yeah. And that was action, is that I put myself in an environment at that time for monetary purposes, but it ended up allowing me to understand who I was as a person even further. And at that time, I think when I started working there, I think I was like 17, 18 years old. So kind of right out of high school, just supporting myself while I was going through post-secondary. So
did you like working in the back of house?
It was fun. The back of house is where it's at, in my opinion, right? Like you are there the entire time with just friends. Whereas when you're at the front of house, you're having to cater and deal with individuals, though you're crafting an excellent skill, interpersonal skills, being able to stand while everybody else is sitting and being able to communicate to somebody while communicating down to them. It's a very dynamic skill working in a restaurant. And then the bartender you're just fake the entire time, right? Like that's a really interesting skill set to have, is that you have to cater to the individual in front of you in hopes that they'll just keep on buying more drinks. And the keg that I worked at was the one in South Edmonton Common. It's a beautiful restaurant. They have a nice, really long bar, really nice restaurants broken up into two pieces. And then you have the back of house, which had openings into both sides of the restaurant. And I was probably insufferable to work with.
Were you like big energy back then?
Too much, man.
Like,
and
like you were
always.
just confident, loud, excitable, personable, like just everything mixed together?
Not personable. Not personable. That was a piece that was missing. So with my friends, I was. So there's like, usually on the keg line, I think there was 6 or 7 stations. Yep. I was typically on saute, or I would be supporting the grill with plating and getting everything organized, right? And then dealing with the servers. Now at that time I was a single guy, right? So when the girls come up, it's a good time. And even the other bros that are servers there as well too. And so I use the word bros because at these restaurants, it's brothers and sisters. It's not coworkers. Like everybody's getting along, but everybody's also fighting, right? It's kind of weird in the restaurant industry. But where the personable piece was missing is that we had a speaker system that was on top of our one of the ovens, and I was constantly plugging my aux in and just playing music. And I was the individual in the restaurant that always had the newest music. And what it ended up leading to was me being the organizer of events at the restaurant. So there would be different DJs coming in. And this was way back in the day. So Deadmau5, if you're listening, hopefully you remember me and maybe my wife, Janet. I used to go to shows where only like 20 people would show up. And it was like Deadmau5 before he was Deadmau5, or Ferry Corsten, maybe like 60, 70 people showing up. And now these individuals are headlining shows where it's like 15, 20, 30,000, right? So we pick them up from the airport, and I don't know why they're in Edmonton, and then take them out to eat some food before going on stage, and then spinning records for the rest of the evening. So, but at the restaurant, at the Keg, I was the individual, be like, hey, this DJ's coming into town, everybody's got to go. And I would buy all the tickets. I would tell people when it was. I would give them reminders, and then once they got to the show, I would buy everybody their first drink. Or I would try to figure out with those bartenders, like, okay, get them going and making them feel warm and welcome. So at that time, I was definitely into connecting people.
What was that? Like, to have that drive and to put all those pieces together? Like, it was like a little promo machine.
Yeah,
different though. Hey, like, what was it? What gave you the like?
I didn't make any money on it, by the way. Just like, I was buying the tickets at face value and selling them at face value. I wasn't marking them up. These were my friends, right? And these are people that I wanted to spend time with. And the reason being is I was lonely as a kid, right? Like, I had my sisters, and they're amazing. Lax and Debbie, like, really beautiful individuals, and very complex individuals as well too. And they always keep me on my toes. But outside of that, my oldest friend that I have in my life on a frequent basis is a friend of mine named Jared, and he's from high school. So I don't have any childhood friends. And the reason being is that I was that awkward kid that couldn't do things that everybody else was doing. So I automatically got put into a box. Yeah. And my mom, and this comes from my mom, going back to the question that you're asking, between the delineation of two people, my mom's a nurse. So she taught me to care for people. Like, in my house, if there was a spider, I would get a piece of paper and gently put it underneath the spider and try to carry the spider out of the house. And which is counterintuitive, because if there's a spider in your house and it's winter, it's like, sorry, buddy, you're dying. But it's like, I tried, right? So my daughter, I've passed that on to my kids as well too. My daughter, who's 5, does it all the time now. And but going back to the tie-in point here is, because I didn't have many friends growing up, I wanted to make sure that people that interacted with me wanted to be around me. Gotcha. So it was a carnal, internal piece of me that was seeking validation of other individuals while trying to make connections. And the people who stuck with me through that development stage have become some of my best friends. Like, I'm in touch with a lot of those people I still work with in that environment. And this isn't the only environment I did this in. I try to do this at everywhere I went. Yeah. And it was overwhelming for some people. They're like, man, this is like intense. Like, why are you always sending me stuff or inviting me to things, or like trying to keep me included? And it was that inclusive mindset of, hey, I know something that's amazing and beautiful that I want you to be a part of. Yeah. And I would go as far as even having like listening sessions in my car. I had awesome cars back in the day with really tricked out sound systems. They weren't loud and rattly. They were refined and tight. So you would get into my car and it would sound perfect. And I would invite individuals, like, hey, come listen to this song. I'm going to teach you how to listen to this type of music. And every type of music is either received from your ears in a way that you understand, or repelled by your ears because it wasn't given to you in the right context. Every piece of music is beautiful, whether it be, I don't know, let's throw a mixture here: pop music, rap music, country music, opera, hard style, EDM, rage metal, opera, whatever it is. All of it is beautiful if the experience of you being exposed to that music is correct. So the relationships that I had went pretty deep. But
it must have been, at that age, like, to have, when I think about myself, if there's somebody like you in my world, it'd be very interesting to figure out, like, where this energy is coming from. Like, it's very different, like, to have that kind of energy and like want to build community and have people involved and introduce people into a music world. Like, that's a lot of energy to deal with.
Yeah. And I think I needed those outlets. If I would just fixated on one thing and drove towards it, then I think it wouldn't have put me on the path that I needed to be on. I needed a myriad of things. So I had sports. I was in the gym 4, 5, 6 times a week during that same period of time. I had school. I had the restaurant. And I was also working at IKEA at the time as well too.
Just because?
Filling every single night as much as I could. Yeah.
Because you needed money. You wanted to be busy. You want to be around people.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah. And there's a reality that exists as well too, is that people that like to talk don't like to be alone with their thoughts. So at that time, when I was younger, I'm guessing, like I don't necessarily know what was fully going through my head at that time, because now, I'm a lot further along than when I was then.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't like being alone with my thoughts, and which is very common, especially for individuals that are, younger millennials, Gen Z, whatever that next generation is coming up, is that when you're alone with your thoughts, it's a dangerous place to be, because then you have to address those thoughts. And people that address their thoughts can do it in one of two ways. They can either use a substance or they can use an experience. For me, I was not a substance-based individual. I chose to go through experiences, and I wanted as many of them as possible so that I could satisfy that thought. I wasn't like, one thing will satisfy this thought. Maybe it's a girlfriend or going and watching Netflix is the thing nowadays. Mine was like, no, let's do this and that and that and that. And then I would go back to that thought, and I would hold on to that thought, and I would determine what actually satisfied it. And that's what slowly molded me in the direction I ended up going into, which was focusing on doing something generational, something that would have an impact, that I could draw a line back to and say, okay, I did what I needed to do based on what I perceived that a human life needs to be. And that's really important as well too, because there's no wrong way of living on this earth. Anybody that suppresses another individual is not an individual that I will ever hold in high regard. And I will never, I use the word never dangerously almost here. I will try my best to never suppress an individual. Sometimes in emotional conversations or conversations that are driven by feelings, that can happen, right? Yeah. But the best of times, I will always try my hardest to serve an individual to the best of my ability with the skills that I have.
It's unbelievable. How did you, before I get into like the continuing on your journey here, but when did you start becoming so reflective?
Having a British mother it's really easy to be forced into reflection, because maybe I'm generalizing here. Sorry for those who have British mothers, but if you can resonate with me here, just follow me down this path. So when I left the house, my shirts always had to be pressed, right? I think I alluded to that earlier on, is like clean clothes, shoes cleaned, shirt straight, hair proper, everything kind of lined up. Even the way the zippers are in the backpack, you want to have them at the top and the middle, or the right or left, right? Like that kind of thing. That's how my mom was. Yeah. So because she was constantly pointing out things in my environment, it forced me to be reflective that, hey, my mom pointed this out, so maybe I should be aware of this. So it's a blessing and a curse, is that I notice everything in my environment, but now as I'm getting older, I'm starting to learn to let that go and only focusing on the things that are providing sustenance to my goals. So there's a reality that exists that you have a skill and you use it just for the sake of using it. That's great, right? But you're not actually using the skill to its best ability. When you take a skill and apply it to where it's needed, that's when a skill is actually coming into fruition. So that's what I've learned to do now, is to take that noise and awareness and then drive it into what actually has value. And I have a friend named Alex, and he gave me the best single phrase to be able to help with those waves of thoughts, is that leave it as it is today. If it doesn't bug you after a month, it was something you shouldn't have been focusing on anyways.
Which you need that, right? Like totally. You could dwell on something and just like take it in a rabbit hole for... Yeah,
which is dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Because usually those rabbit holes involve other people, and then you're hurting people's feelings. So you got to be careful.
So wind me through university. Did you go to university?
I went to SAIT.
Okay.
I went to SAIT, yeah.
Does it tie into kind of what you're up to today?
Totally. So what I'm up to today at Zeno, co-CEO and co-founder, Kai and I started together. We both shared the CEO title.
What year?
In what time did I go to school? Or
let's do both. When did you go to school? When did you start?
I started school in 2012.
Okay.
And I started Zeno with Kai in 2015, April 28th to be exact.
So graduate?
Yeah, and but not even graduate. Third year of school.
Third year you started this thing up.
Third year of school. I saw what was going on already, and I'm like, okay, I know what I need to do here. And it's interesting because the reason I went to school was for an interest, like a really, I guess it's an odd story, but
just the perfect spot to tell it.
Yeah,
because I'm interested.
Yeah. So when I was working at the keg, I ended up actually getting fired from that job. So like that rambunctiousness that I talked about.
Yeah.
There was one manager who came in who just didn't know me, and she was from a different keg, and like I have nothing but respect for her, and she actually taught me some of the best lessons I've had in my life today. But she was really cut and dry with me, and she's like, "This is how we're gonna do things, and your way's not gonna work." Now, when an outsider comes into your situation, your guard is gonna be up regardless. But then, as an individual, I like to push back against things, and I like to go against I like to go against the ham and pineapple pizza and stand against the wall, right? Like that's that kind of thing.
Yep.
So go against the grain. And she's the one that said, hey, listen, like you're just not a good fit here anymore. You should move on. And at that time, the keg was a big part of my identity. In the restaurant industry, there's a term called lifers, right? I wasn't on that line. And those people who stayed in the restaurant industry, like they're living a cool lifestyle and they're doing their thing.
Yep.
But I was going to school. So I was like, okay, you know what? This isn't the end of the world for me. I need to figure out what I need to do now. And I ended up, at that time, I had been with my wife now, and she was my girlfriend then. And she was always patient with me, and she was going through post-secondary, and I didn't know what to do. So her and I sat down and we're like, okay, well, now it's time for me to really address what I'm doing in my future. At that time, I was in school for computer engineering. So this is that post-secondary stuff that I was doing.
Yep.
And that was in Edmonton. So that was at MacEwan University, now Grant MacEwan there. So kind of just feeling out things and taking courses and trying to see what I could do there. And I stepped back from all of that. I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this stuff anymore. Like I want to just try getting into some sort of corporate world and try a job like that. So I ended up landing a job at Baker Hughes, which is a multinational oil and gas company.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working out of Leduc, and it was a really cool experience, super cool people, really, well, like oil and gas, really good pay at a young age. But I started realizing really quickly that there was a ceiling above me. And how I realized that is I asked the person above me, and going back to questions, how long will it take me to take your job? I straight up asked the person. Yeah. He told me 5 years. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're 21, 22, you're like, whoa, that's a lifetime. Mm-hmm. 5 years. So I said, okay, well, can you transfer me to Calgary? And there's a layer missing here. So while I was working there, my wife, who was going to school for accounting, had just finished and landed a job with Flint and got pulled into Calgary. Yep. So she's alone in Calgary, doing her thing. And I was driving up every other weekend. And if I hadn't figured out a way to get to Calgary, our relationship was done. And I really valued her as an individual. One of the first people I met in my life that accepted me for who I was and didn't push back against me. She just let me be who I needed to be. Mm-hmm. And I still don't know how she did it and does it. So when I was trying to figure out how to get to Calgary, I talked to my boss and I'm like, hey, can I transfer? And at that time, I wasn't really using the education I had already gotten. I was working with my hands, but there was still an engineering mechanism to it. Like I still had to take those things into consideration and utilize the skill at a basic level, but not to this full potential. And I found that I wasn't really liking the engineering side of things. So I said, hey, there's a machinist opportunity in Calgary. Can I be transferred there? I didn't have any experience, right? So they weren't willing to give it to me. Yep. So I just quit. I'm like, hey, that's fine. I'm going to quit. And I'm going to talk to my wife about what it is that we needed to do. So we sat down and we talked about our goal. And keep in mind, we're 21, 22. And I'm like, when do you want to retire? I asked her that question. She told me 45. So, okay, what do you want to do when you retire? And she said humanitarian work. So I extracted this information from her. And then we went through a list of every single opportunity or job out there that we thought would be most valuable to individuals in developing nations. So it was basic stuff. I'm like, carpenter, yeah, that's not a bad one, but I feel like, swinging a hammer and doing and figuring out carpentry is difficult, but not impossible. And then looked at welding. That one kind of satisfied the thing. Then I landed on electrical. And when I went on the electrical and electrician path specifically, I started looking deeper into it. And I'm like, oh, one of the keys to overcoming poverty is access to electricity. Mm-hmm. And then I learned from my dad, I'm like, well, this guy didn't have electricity until he was a teenager. And this is where all this poverty was coming from, is like this crazy reality that people exist where they don't have running water, they don't have heating, they don't have lights at night to even read something if they wanted to. So their education window is defined by when the sun is up, which is very dangerous as well. So I landed on that. And being in Edmonton at the time, I didn't really have a clear path into how to become an electrician. And I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have anybody guiding me. So I just went on Google, and the internet's always been my friend, is that I just Googled it, and there was a pre-employment program that I had to pay, I think like $4,000 or $5,000 to get into. Got into the pre-employment program, got the highest marks in my class, made a bunch of really good friends during that entire process, and then ended up getting into the field. And that time in 2012, there was an abundance of work in Alberta that I had a job before I even got out of school. And when I got onto site, having spent like $4 or $5 grand, I found out really quickly that I didn't have to go through that. That I could have just called the company and they would have just hired me. But here's the kicker. I had weight behind my investment in that career already. I'd put money into it. So now there was no turning back. And that's what led me to, just working and trying to pick up a skill, and a very useful skill, mind you. Like being an electrician is awesome. I have my red seal.
What do you do?
Yeah, I had my red seal as an electrician. And I can confidently say now I could build a house. Like I learned so much during my time in the trade that I could build a house and know all the key elements to build, to what it takes to bring something together. But I also worked in the commercial industrial sector. So I know how buildings work.
Yep.
I know how these massive fuel facilities that power the world work, like all these different things, having, doing wiring one wire at a time. I kind of learned that there. Mm-hmm. But that's where I met Kai. And this is where it shifts gears. In the field.
Oh, okay.
So I was in my third year and I was working for a company called Concept. And they're no longer around, but I was working at a sulfur facility east of Calgary. And at that time I was driving a completely, for the people who know the terminology, completely blacked out Audi A4. I had it tuned and it was awesome. It was a quick car, really fuel efficient as well too, because it was turbocharged.
Yep.
And I pulled up to this site and it's a rocky road with a huge bump and my car's lowered. And I'm like, oh man, this is not good for my car, but whatever. Pull into the site and there's all these lifted trucks there, which is pretty typical, a Raptor, really nice truck. And then there was another lowered, blacked out Audi. Same model, slightly different color.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, this is weird.
Like taillights blacked, like everything black?
Yeah. Okay. Maybe some illegal mods that I wasn't aware of at the time. You're a kid. I was definitely not, but it looked awesome. It looked killer. And so I get on the site and I see this other blacked out Audi sitting there. And I was like, okay, that's kind of odd. Usually you just see trucks, right? Or like a Jeep or something like that. Yeah. So I get into the area where all the electricians are meeting and I'm a third year at this time, right? So our foreman at that time, the person leading the site, Ben, was like, hey, I want you to go with that guy. And he pointed to Kai. And the first question I asked him was, because he had this vibe about him where I'm like, this guy feels like a bro. He doesn't feel like somebody who was, born and bred Albertan, which has a really cool vibe to it too, right? Hardworking, resilient, could break you over the side of a table, but could hug you to death as well too, right? That's why the trades guys are in Alberta, and being part of that group, I was a different flavor, and Kai was too. So I started talking to him, and I was like, "Hey, you like trance? Awesome. You like this kind of music? Great. Do you happen to know whose car that is?" He's like, "Oh, that's my car, man." And I was like, "Oh, no way." And the deeper we got into it, the more we realized there was a huge amount of alignment. He moved to Canada when he was 6 years old from Germany. And he had a mom who was super similar. She was vegetarian her entire life. He had a huge amount of that same experience. So all of a sudden, we really had a very similar story of our Canadian experience. But they delineated quite significantly as we got older, because Kai's more reserved. He's quieter, more thoughtful. Internally, I'm thoughtful externally with my words. That's how I test the environment around me. Yep. But he takes all the information and then he comes back with very sage one-liners, which is always fun to listen to. So that's basically what ended up happening is we had this crazy, for lack of better words, bromance start.
Yep.
And then it was time for us to go back to school. The job was done there. So we ended up going back to school, and Kai was in his 4th year of schooling and I was in my 3rd year of schooling. And this movie had just come out. And this was in 2015, and Interstellar had just dropped in theaters. I had watched it, I think, a few weeks before, or maybe just a week before, with a different group of friends. And I was enamored with this movie. So I grabbed Kai and one of our really close friends, Keaton. I'm like, hey guys, we got to go watch this movie. It's unreal. And this is my 2nd time watching it. And it was so good. And those who haven't watched Interstellar, please go take out the time and watch it in a focused manner. Throw your phone in a corner and just watch the movie and take it in for what it's worth. And we had watched the movie, and at the end of it, everybody was quiet. We left the theater. I wanted to hear what they said. I was really interested in hearing what they said was, and they were both, like, wow, this is a crazy movie, so on and so forth, as amazing movies always do to you. Yep. But Kai was a little bit different. I asked him, he's like, hey, do you want to go grab a drink? Like, let's just go unpack this movie. I want to talk about this movie. And we ended up going to a place downtown. I ended up sitting down. Before you know it, we had shook on a business. Wow. That movie had inspired us to believe that anything was possible. And for those who haven't watched Interstellar, it's a story about love. That love is the only thing that transcends time and space. That's the fundamental underlying factor behind that entire movie. How they demonstrate that on the big screen is masterfully done. Christopher Nolan, amazing director, producer, whatever you call it. One of my boys is named Nolan, ironically enough. Masterful with what he does, but he put on this artwork to represent love over time, in a journey of Matthew McConaughey trying to travel across space to save humanity, but then also to try to travel back in time to save his relationship with his daughter. It's nuts. It's nuts. So that inspired us to start the business, and we tried naming the business Endurance after the spaceship that Matt Damon tried to crash. Matt Damon is just like, he's a good guy, but he's a bad guy all the time, right? Like, it's, come on, Matt. Why is Matthew McConaughey always a good guy and you're always a bad guy? You got to figure this out. So the ship that Matt tried to crash and Matthew McConaughey saved was the Endurance.
Okay.
That name was taken. And then eventually, and we've had, that was the first name, unofficial. First official name was Virtuoso Electric. Second official name was Virtuoso Energy. We didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves in the electrical industry. We wanted to serve the earth by providing solar, battery, and electric vehicle charging solutions to 1 million homes by 2040. That's our North Star, 1 million homes by 2040, which will have a major impact on our emissions as a nation as well too. And the key piece behind all of that was that we changed our names and then eventually landed on Zeno. And Zeno has been a killer name so far.
When did that change?
That happened in January 17 is when the name flipped, but it was a year process before that. And the company that we ended up going with was Massive Media. And I have a lot of empathy for them now going through that process. We went from Virtuoso Energy to Zeno. And they convinced us to change the name, saying, hey, like, your name doesn't really, it sounds like virtual, it's hard to spell. Like, there's all the different factors of why this name just doesn't work. We should figure out something that's better in alignment with you. And why I wanted to open with, I have a lot of empathy for them. Being in the marketing and branding and advertising industry is probably one of the hardest industries you can be in. And I only learned this after going through that experience with them. I was probably one of their more difficult clients to deal with because everything had to be precise. Yeah. Everything had to be perfect. It was a major investment for us as a company. Probably the greatest investment that we made outside of our people to date. And it was more painful to me than the first year of my daughter's life.
Wow.
That's how much of a roller coaster it was, right?
Yep.
With babies, if they poop, you just wipe their bums. With adults, when they poop, God knows, like, what are you supposed to do, right? Like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
So, but they were an amazing company at the end of the day because the results were fantastic. And Zeno, the name, has so much weight behind it for a few different reasons. One of the reasons is one of the first books that Kai and I read when we started the company. It was Shoe Dog. Have you heard of Shoe Dog?
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people have read it. And those who haven't, please take out the time and read it. It's an amazing read. It's a story of how Nike came to be.
It's amazing.
Written by Phil Knight.
Yep.
And by the end of that book, I was like, when everything in his life started collapsing, I was like in tears reading that last chapter. I was like, man, this is some crazy stuff that Phil had to go through in order for his journey to come to life. And I looked, I'm like, where did that name Nike come from, right? Like, well, it's 4 letters. It's like awesome, right? Like, it works really well. It's easy to sell, and it can be mispronounced. So some people say Zeno, some people say Zeno, some people say Nike, some people say Nike. It's like, it has its own identity just by where it's being pronounced based on where people stand on the planet Earth. That's crazy. Like, that's where Zeno is really magical as well. Yep. And then obviously it has the same roots in Greek mythology, but it's also the name of the individual that founded Stoicism. Now, Kai, as an individual, I look up to him. Kai's 4 years younger than me, but I look up to him in so many different ways, and I have nothing but love for the guy.
He's a bro. Straight up. That's the only way to put it. The way you guys connected on that job site, that's like that doesn't happen. Period. Like, the chances of that happening are non-existent.
It's happened to me twice.
No way.
My wife.
Okay. I was gonna say, if I was gonna guess, that'd be the only person.
My wife was the first person. And what I mean by happened to me twice is 2 people that were able to look through my flaws and accept me for who I am, which is a skill that now I've learned. If look through people's flaws and accept them as they are, which is one of the hardest things to do as a human being. People now more than ever are opposed and fighting for their opinion. But what they forget is that there's a middle ground between both opinions. In order to be on the left, you need to have a center. In order to be on the right, you need to have a center. And in the middle is where everybody should meet. So they taught me neutrality. And when I met Kai, I didn't know it at the time because I wasn't aware of Stoicism, but he's naturally very stoic, quiet, reserved. There's a purpose. I need to get to that purpose. I'll do whatever it takes to get to that purpose, and I'll do it quietly. Yeah. And when I get punched in the face, I'll never cry. When I get beaten down, I'll never complain. And that's what Stoicism is in of itself, is taking the skills that you've been given as a person and ignoring the skills that you don't have with the goal of taking those skills and making the world a better place for serving society. And that's what Zeno of Citium, who his boat crashed onto the shores of Athens and then he somehow became a philosopher, was all about, is how do we unlock the potential of society for the betterment of every other human being on this planet. And that's what the name Zeno is really all about, is that deep feeling that you have of a person, of wanting to be, valued, of wanting to have a place, wanting to have a purpose. And we believe that in our industry, when you're providing solar, electric vehicle charging stations and battery solutions to homeowners exclusively, we only focus on the homeowners. These individuals, especially the ones living in Canada, don't need to do this. Right? Like our power outages do happen, but not that often. So the decision that they're making is a stoic decision. They're doing their part for society. Though solar has really good financial benefits nowadays, a lot of our early clients were doing it just for the sake of that it was the right thing to do based on their perspective on reality. So it has a lot of weight behind it. And it really was inspired through Kai. And then I somehow formulated the story around it based on all the different experiences that we've had to date to try to build it into a brand that carries some weight behind it that people can really get behind.
And now that you have that, like the first 3 name iterations, you were just like, did you know in your gut, you're like, something's missing? Yeah,
totally. It's like the reality of what life is, right? Is that there's a certain point in time where you feel like you've arrived, right? And when you feel like you've arrived, it's for a few different reasons. It's because your mind, your body, and your soul are in alignment. Now, I'll break that out to what it's worth. Your brain, your heart, and your gut, right, are in alignment. And when your gut is lined up, it's because your brain and your heart don't need to process what's going on around you. And that's where things weren't lined up for me. Something in my gut was telling me that Virtuoso's not it. And now Zeno, I'm like, this is it. Lock and stock.
We're all in.
2 smoking barrels. Let's go. Like, it's good.
And how's the company evolved? Like, as far as what you've been up to since the day you started. So actually, before you go there, you started this thing. You're in 3rd year.
Yeah.
Here's the idea. What did you guys actually decide you were going to do? You wanted to make the world a better place?
Yeah, we were electricians, right? So we're like, okay, well, we wanted to make the world a better place, and we wanted to live the life that we wanted to live on our terms.
As in, like, do your own thing, be your own boss.
Thing. Yeah, be your own boss. Little do we know the pain that would come along with that. If we had known, it would have probably paralyzed us before getting into it. Though people actually warned us. There's people that warned us, do you know how hard it is to start a business? But we're in Calgary. Calgary's an amazing place. And from the perspective of people here are here to help you. Everybody's working together towards something and their own thing, more importantly. So going back to your question, it's really hard to kind of bring that all together into like a clear path, right? Because there's so much that happens during that period of time, and it's elusive until you take that time to reflect and look back in time and say, okay, what actually happened here? And for us, like, the big thing is, we, at that time, when we first started the company on April 28th of 2015, just wanted to, first and foremost, do something that was as inspirational as what we saw in Interstellar. So we knew it had to be something big.
It's wild that you can reference that movie. It's wild that movie hit home for you at such a deep level that you could build this out. Yeah.
Every time I go back and watch it, and I watch it quite often, I take something new away from it.
Cool.
And lately it's been about my kids. I have 3 kids, right? I have identical boys, Nolan and Kendrick. They're 2 years old, and a 5-year-old daughter, Emma Olivia, and she's amazing. And not that my boys aren't, but there's something really special about that girl. So, well, she communicates with me. I suppose there's something really special about my boys too. But they're 2 years old and they're boys, so all they're doing is just wrecking the house, which is really fun to watch. I'll be honest with you. They just clamber over each other and just destroy everything. But if I get back to the ethos of what we're discussing, when we decided to really get into gear was ironically 1 year later. So we were moonlighting, right? The company had started wiring kitchens, wiring basements, completely compromising our health, climbing into attics because we knew we had to make money, and I'm sure there was asbestos in there. So I'm probably gonna end up paying the price at some point. But we all end up paying the price at some point, right? So whatever, it is what it is. And as we were going through that process, we were taking a look at our lives around us and what we really wanted to do. So Kai and I are spending a lot of time together. I'm getting to know him. He's getting to know me in a professional sense. Now, we'd already had a personal relationship, but now we're in a professional sense of like, okay, what is it that we're really trying to do here? And then boom, out of nowhere, I get a phone call from Kai. He's like, hey, man. And to give you some context, when Kai called me, he's on a job site, and I think I was somewhere else trying to figure out like material. And he's like, I just got an email from SAIT. They're having a business competition in April of 2016. And as an alumni, I'm invited. So I'm not even graduated yet at this point. I'm still working my way through school. Yep. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And for me, I'm like, let's go. Not looking at the consequences of what day is it on? Yep. When is this actually going to happen? If it turns out the day of the competition was the day of my provincial exam and the night before my national exam to get my red seal. So I already have all this weight on top of me to make sure that I'm ready for my exams, passed them both with flying colors, which was it was nerve wracking. But that night between those two major exams was the event. And I made friends during that process of going through that with SAIT. And keep in mind, this was at SAIT as well too. Yep. That Dragon's Den style business competition was called Build Your Business, I believe. Okay. And what the competition required you to do is to put together a business plan and then to pitch it. There was the president of Princess Auto there, the founders of Parkland, which is like fast gas and things like that nature. Yep. They're the individuals, Jack and Joan, Donald, who donated the $5,000 out of the winning. And we came to that competition with a pitch about being electricians that were focused on solar, which was partially inspired by three people: my mom, Kai's mom, and my wife. Three women, three very strong women. And my wife was the one who really pushed it over the line, because Kai and I are useless when it came to business at that time. We were keeping a tally of our cash flow on a Norm Cholak realtor piece of paper. You know those rectangles that you get in the mail? That's what we were keeping a tally of our funds on. Like, we had no idea what we were doing.
Spent this, we made this.
Yeah, and Kai was the one that was tallying on it. My trust for him was unparalleled. I was like, hey, you just keep a focus on this. I'm going to trust that you're calculating everything. This isn't a skill set I have. My wife's an accountant. I married an accountant. Let's just be real about this.
You're covered.
Yeah. So I'm good there. And I believe in you as well too. So we're good here. And she's going through that. She's going through her thing. And she's like, you guys need to have a differentiator here. And we're like, well, we really want to do solar, but we're an oil and gas province. We don't really know. She's like, just put it down there and then put all your energy into it. So we designed our pitch around being an electrical company that was focused on providing solar to whoever. At that time, solar wasn't a thing. So you want it on your roof, you want it on your business, you want it on your mom. Like, we're putting solar on everything. It doesn't matter, right? So it was kind of a crazy thing that we kind of got behind, and we won the competition. It was $5,000. And here's the icing on the cake. After we won that $5,000, Kai and I went to, I forget what the hill is. It's the hill that's on top of Kensington and overlooks the city. And there's like the benches there and some really nice houses. So we went to that hill and overlooked the city, and we're like, okay, one day we're gonna have a building in downtown and we're gonna make a difference in this world. And the following week we team quit our jobs. And we're like, yeah, $5,000 is enough for us to get started. We're good. And that was enough. The spirit of the opportunity to take a few dollars and do something that we really wanted to do was enough. And oh man, the years between now and then have been crazy. Like, they've been absolutely wild. Crazy. Yeah. So
before the other guest I had today, we were talking about, people always see the highlights. They always see the end of it.
Yeah.
They see where you guys are right now. They see the awards you guys are putting up, but there's all the journey before that nobody really has an eye on.
Yeah. The first 2 years of the business, we lived off savings that we had accumulated while we were electricians. And my wife supported my end of things as well too. Yeah. And
you stopped moonlighting?
No, yeah, we basically, so after that competition, the week after, we ended up we just quit. Okay. And we're like, okay.
So no more basement renos, no more like pulling wires for anybody, or just you guys?
We ended up having to do that still. So that moonlighting of pulling wires and for basements and kitchens and stuff like that kept on going, but now it was full time. Yeah. So it was an obsessive full time thing. So waking up and being at the gym by 4 a.m., not up at 4 a.m., at the gym at 4 a.m. And then being at a job site by 6:30, 7 a.m. after having worked out, having to iron out all the kinks of everything that we wanted to do personally before the day started. Yep. So we're at the gym, and then we were on site before the sun was even up in most cases, and then worked relentlessly until the sun went down. and just, living off coffee, energy drinks, whatever it was. And I never drank coffee, but I needed it that time. The first time I really started drinking coffee was when the company started, just because I needed that little bit of an extra boost.
Yeah.
But the reality is like, once our money actually ran out so many times in the company, but there was only ever 1 year in the company, and it was last year that we chose to take a loss. And we chose to take a loss to invest in people. We wanted to make sure that the people that had been in the company for that period of time now had really strong leaders and really skilled individuals. So Kai and I basically bottomed out our salaries, as we always had, and then put as much of the cash flow in the company into investing in bringing on the right individuals. So an interim CEO, things of that nature, just to make sure that we understood everything that was right, because we just weren't smart enough to figure it out on our own. We needed specialists to come in to tell us what we needed to do. Yep. And then we just really believed in them until one of two things happened. We either utilized all of their skill sets and said thank you to them, or they stuck around and now some of those individuals are leaders in our organization. Yep. But during that period of time, like, it was crazy. Like, Kai was living in his basement and renting out the upper floor to teenagers because he couldn't get anybody else. And these kids were like doing burnouts in his driveway. And like, he even rented out, and this is how good of a guy Kai is. He even rented out his rooms in his house to individuals who were marginalized. So there's there's an organization in Calgary where you can rent out to individuals who are traumatized, and they don't provide you with much. I think it's like $1,000 a month or something like that. And it was to the point where like the person didn't know how to use a toilet. They didn't know how to use a shower, and Kai's water would be getting backed up. He'd come into the basement, for example, and then it would just be flooded with, like everything that comes in out of a sewer. And, he would call me and I would laugh at him.
Thanks, buddy. Good first call.
Yeah, well, when I kind of laughed, totally. And I was like, oh, this is hilarious. I can't believe this is happening, man. This is so funny. And Kai,
have a good night.
There's people that you want in your life that you call because you need comfort. I'm not that guy. I'm going to be the guy that tries to look for the irony in situations. Like, oh, okay, come on. It's not that bad. Like, just
we're good.
Move it forward, like, it's okay. Like, it's not that bad. And Kai has a personal mantra. One of them is like, life's a joke. So I was like, hey, that's your mantra? Okay, well, let's keep everything fresh and funny, right? So that was kind of the role that I knew I needed to take on for him. Yep. But even in my life, there was times where our first commercial project, for example, which was Nelson Mandela High School, it's a big solar project there. Yep. One of the first larger scale Calgary Board of Education projects. And I had to have a conversation with Janet, and I was like, hey, like, we got to remortgage our house, or we got to basically pull out money from our line of credit. And like, she looked at me, she's like, okay, sure. But when are we going to have it back by? And what's your plan? And I gave her basically like, I think like a year, 6 months, a year. And the plan is just work our butts off. She never questioned. She never questioned me. And she's a breadwinner at this time.
And you needed cash to buy the pieces material, to put the stuff up on the
material, pay the people. Yep. We've never once in the 7 years, going on 8 years now, soon here, never not paid anybody on time. There's obviously been disputes in different payments when you have external vendors in terms of like, hey, this job isn't satisfied based on these engineering prints or based on the work order, things like that nature. But internally, we've never once been behind on that, which was so important to us, is to always make sure you treat the people well based on the skills that you have at the time, because those evolve over time. Like, treating people well isn't about just doing it right out of the gate. It's about constantly making it better as time goes along based on what you've learned over time, because it could always be a better tomorrow. And they always say the grass is greener, right? And individuals will do one of two things. They'll be like, oh, well, the grass is greener, and they accept the reality that they're in, or they'll learn how to make the grass greener where they are. Yep. And that's what we really hooked ourselves to.
Did you, so it's been almost 8 years, the people that are like, either question the idea of starting your own business or, warning you, or, those red flags of starting. Yeah. Now that you're 8 years in, what do you understand what they're talking about? Are you like even just further in on this idea and just, this is it? Yeah.
One of two thoughts always end up happening. One is the right thought, and the other thought is the I did it thought, right? Typically with these types of things, the I did it thought is like, how we told you we could do it, and we're happy, right? Yeah. But not prideful. We're grateful. We're grateful that all these things happened and that we are where we are. So that's the first thought. The second thought is, were they ever right? The stresses that it put on me personally, the lack of control that I had on certain times in my life, not taking vacations, not being able to see friends, not being able to see family. I think I almost lost like some really good personal relationships on this journey to where I am now. Yep. And like people, like relatives just hated me. They're like, what have you become? Who are you? All you do is work. Like, where's your health? Where's all this other stuff?
Mm-hmm. Which there's no, and it's finding a balance isn't, there really isn't a balance. Like it's trying to manage what's happening.
Well, and that's a reality of having a business. I find that I have balance now. Like, we have 4 very competent, strong leaders in the organization that are managing 4 different divisions, and we're about to have 5 divisions here. So we're at the point in the company now where we're actually bringing in a full-time an HR specialist to help manage things in the organization and make sure the culture is really well maintained, because our culture is the main thing that's evolved over time. What we're doing hasn't evolved that much. You got electricians installing electrical related things. In our case, it's renewable based technologies. The culture is what's changed. It went from grind or die to now what it is, which is, how do we make sure that we take the opportunity that we have, which is being in a line of work that has purpose, that you can actually get really well paid at, and make sure that everybody that's part of it is satisfied based on what their personal goals are, and aligning them with what the company's goals are. And that's where we are right now. So the culture's really changed, and I think that's the biggest thing that's evolved over the time.
To put an HR team in place, did you lead that kind of area?
Yeah, so my responsibility on my side of the fence as the co-CEO are big ideas, research and development, culture, and then a little bit of lead, manage, and assist with Kai specifically. But he does it for the rest of the organization. So Kai is much more exposed to our leadership team. He's what we call in our organization an integrator, and I'm the visionary in this current role. But Kai also has visionary considerations. So one of the things that we're actually looking for right now is a COO to replace what Kai's currently doing, and then him and I are going to be sharing that visionary piece where we're both formulating the culture and formulating the big strategy, and then our ideas to making sure that we're staying innovative as well.
Which is to be putting these people in places to help run the business, and then focusing on the vision, the culture. Was that a, did you figure that out? Or is like, because it's an interesting way to build this out.
Yeah, so the vision, for me as an individual, I think I've always been able to articulate what I'm looking at. Most people can look at something and they can't explain it, right? But imagine being able to do that in the future where something doesn't exist. That's what I know as an individual. I'm not unique by any means in that skill set, but that's what I know that I have, that I can see something in the future and I know how to articulate it. But Kai can feel it. That's where has that visionary ability. He can feel it. And that's a crazy thing, because to be able to have a gut feeling on something and know it's true is such a unique thing that a person can have. And I think that's really, really rare. So between the two of us, that's what we've been able to really define. And we understood that that vision needed to be backed up with something that people could get behind and stay behind for a long period of time. So we have 2 goals outside of our main goal, which is the 1 million homes by 2040. It's to bring back long-term employment and be the highest paid employer in our sector. Now, most people will be like, oh, well, it's, that's about money, but let's just put it this way. 2 things that people want out of life is financial security and convenience. If we can provide consistent work, convenience is taken care of. And if we can provide good paying work, then the financial side is taken care of. So now let's really talk about what you really want. And that's where our culture comes into play, and the vision comes into play, and the way that people treat each other comes into play. We have our 4 core values, which is loyalty, understand the value of reputation, be kind, and challenge to be better. Those 4 things were the embodiment of what our grind or die culture was really all about, but in concrete terms that everybody knows. And if you ask anybody in the organization, they should be able to tell you what those core values are. It's not like, hey, this is between me and the leadership team. No, everybody in the organization knows 1 million homes by 2040, and they know our core values, because that's how we communicate, and that's how we make sure that everybody's being treated fairly. We measure off the core values more than anything else.
How did you guys put all this together?
Kai,
you're going to trades, and just for context, my dad went to St. graduated, built houses 35 years. My brother-in-law's an electrician. I grew up on job sites. So,
nice.
You guys are Red Seal trades, and now to put all this together on this side of things, like, where's it coming from?
We have this little saying that we still believe in is, Kai and I are both pretty dumb people, but together, we're half a brain. We're together a full brain. We each have half a brain. So knowing that and having that mindset in place is that we're not going to be the smartest people in the room. And this is always hard to hear, right? Is that, you're not going to be the smartest person in the room and just hire somebody. You can't just do that. You got to earn money and then make profit
Yeah.
or get enough cash flow going that you can take off the top of your bottom line and invest. So there's strategy behind all of this as well too. But that mindset was the most important thing, that there's always somebody smarter than you in the room. Now, I didn't always naturally think that. I used to think that I was one of the smartest people in the room until I've met people that are now significantly smarter than me. I'm definitely near the bottom of the pit. But I believed in Kai's mindset and his humility that he led through in the way that he carried himself. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Yeah, it turns out you know way more than I do about this stuff, and I know way more than you do about this stuff. So I'm going to agree with that statement that we're both actually not the smartest people.
Yep.
And he was one of the first people next to my wife to really exemplify that to me. And that allowed us to be able to unlock so many different things in the organization, which, going to your question, was something called EOS traction. So Kai ended up talking to a gentleman by the name of Chris Jones. Chris Jones. Yeah, Chris Jones is an awesome guy.
Right.
So he's our implementer.
When did you come across EOS? What year of your business?
2020, I think it is now. Yeah, 2020.
Okay.
So yeah.
5 years or ish. 5 years in.
Yeah, 5 years in. 2019, 2020. It was somewhere in that timeline.
Okay,
And we, from where we were then, we basically, Chris came in and poked holes in everything that we were doing.
Did you go find him?
Different individuals ended up introducing him to him. Sean Freeman. Do you know Sean Freeman by chance? I would definitely recommend having him on the podcast.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. And
I'll call him out.
he's an entrepreneur that has been really successful over the years, has sold his business. Now, I think he's multiple times now, and got bought up by TELUS, so one of the big dogs in Canada, right?
Yep.
And he's living a good lifestyle, and he's focused on basically tech support solutions and things of that nature.
Yep.
And Sean, sorry if you're listening to this and I butchered anything that you're doing in a simplified manner, but he introduced Kai and him are friends, and he introduced Kai to Chris, and then I went to the meeting, and I went in there with my hat on of like distrust. I'm like, okay, is this guy actually going to be what we need him to be in? But after the meeting, I talked to Kai, I'm like, you think this is the right move? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, this is your call. It's expensive too. It's not like it's cheap. It's really expensive. Okay, we're going to make this investment. Let's do this. I'm signing off on this. And when I sign off on something, I don't want to talk about it. Let's just get to it. I'm never going to go back and be like, I can't believe we did this. I've never been that person. Once I make a decision, I agree with it because of one reason and one reason alone. There's no better teacher in life than failure. So if you go back in time and you start regretting things, what value is that? Rather, look at the moment that you're in, why you failed, analyze it, and then move forward. That's where the real value is. So no matter what money you spend in life, it'll always end up teaching you something. Sometimes it'll feel like more money than you wish you had spent, but at the end of the day, you end up winning. But this one worked out. Chris took us from at that time when we first met him to 14 people to now we're almost at 100 people in the company. And I believe, and I know we're not perfect, nothing in life is perfect, but I believe that we're providing good, gainful, purposeful employment to individuals who are really special. We have a very strict hiring policy, and everybody that's come through the door is important and really believes in what we're doing. And if they don't, then that's fine as well too, right? Because not everybody's going to always fit into your puzzle piece, but everybody plays by the rules of engagement, is moving everything forward to that 1 million homes by 2040.
Wild.
Yeah.
Huh. So it's fine. Yeah. As soon as you said yes, I was like, oh yeah. I met Chris through a buddy of mine, Doug Rollick.
Oh, nice.
Right when I started my business in 2019, Doug was just like, hey, you should go talk to Chris. I'm just starting. There's no way I'm paying for anything.
And what was Doug? What is Doug to you?
Doug's a custom home builder.
Okay, cool.
And I water ski with him.
Oh, water skiing.
Yeah.
So where do you do that here in Alberta?
Yeah,
or?
there's a little club just south of Calgary on Dunbow Road, right by Carmody Golf Course.
No way.
Yeah, there's two man-made lakes down there, 2 boats, a jump, and courses.
Crazy.
Yeah. So ski buddy, he's just like, yeah, I know you're starting your own thing. You should just go talk to this guy. And anyways, I met Jonesy, and
nice.
Yeah, I just kind of just listened. He listened to what I was up to. He's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and sorry if I'm underexposed to like things like water skiing, like immigrant kid, like Banff, going to Banff was it. That was the ultimate. That was it. That was like the ultimate vacation. And then we would just stay in the YWC. I think it was like the hostel in Banff.
Yeah.
That's where I grew up, like on my summers, is staying in the hostel with my parents.
Yeah.
And then just exploring Banff on foot, right? So water skiing genuinely sounds fascinating to me.
It's a wild sport for sure.
That's awesome.
This has been wild. Again, off camera, Brian, we worked together, and he was just, when he got a chance to listen to you speak at the Energy Summit, Disruptor Summit. He was like, no, this is the guy. And it's been really cool to just kind of hear your story, listen to you talk and listen to how you think. That's probably been the most aha moment for me. Like, it's very different. So when I ask like how you figured all this out, it's just, it's me kind of quizzing you on like, how is this even possible?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, like, thank you.
Yep.
It's very humbling to always get people's perspective on who you are as a person, because the hardest thing, especially when you're in business, is, am I doing it right?
Yeah.
That's always the question that you end up going back to. Everything else falls apart. It always ends up going back to the question, am I doing it right? Or the other side of the coin is, what did I do wrong? And that's where that reflective state comes back into place. So I think, I guess I just don't think I'm, the guy or unique, but I just know one thing above all else. The only thing that keeps me up at night is humanity not surviving our arrogance. And why I formulate it that way is that never in history has any single individual had a louder voice. You can take your phone, you can record something brash, and you can post it on the internet, and people are going to listen to you.
Yeah.
It can be 15 views, or it can be 15 million views. And that's created an awesome opportunity for refinement of us as a species, as human beings. I look at the development of humans as the tip of a spear. And the more that we keep on going in the direction that we're going in, the more voices that are allowed to be heard, the sharper the spear is going to be had. Because when you're sharpening the tip of something, you're swaying back and forth, you're moving left and right. You're not just staying in the middle, or you're not moving it right only. You're going left and then you're going right. And you're sharpening the tip of that spear. And the more that we're willing to allow the even extremes of perspectives to live, the less extreme those perspectives will come, and the more normal that will become. And that fuels diversity. And that's what I believe that Canada has as a nation more than any other country on this planet. That's simultaneously our greatest strength, but also our greatest weakness is diversity. It makes it very hard for us to make decisions because there's so many opinions, but when those decisions are made, it's amazing. We're one of the only countries in the world where transgender rights are a thing, but we're also the most advanced oil and gas industry in the world. We're one of the only countries that, simultaneously still pays honor to a queen, but then has provinces that want to separate, right? It's super cool. Like, it's amazing to see these things, and everybody's voice should be heard, right?
Yep.
So I think maybe that's where my perspective comes from, is that I believe that reality is neutral. How you choose to react with it is what will allow you to understand your place in it.
Dude, it's been so cool to sit here and listen to you. It's been just your thought process and what makes you tick is very, very unique.
Yeah, so, I appreciate it, man. It comes down to people, right?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, I keep on giving you answers for all this stuff, but like,
no, it's great, dude.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. I could pick your brain for a long time, but I have to be cognizant of your time. So, the way I put a bow on these, I got one question, and it ends the same way. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Man, Calgary's a special place. Like a really, really, really special place. No knock on Edmonton, that's where I grew up. No knock on Birmingham, that's where I came from. And no knock on India, that's where my culture is most derived from. Compliments to all those places, because that's what Calgary is. Calgary is simultaneously Edmonton, England, India, all in one, but in a setting that just works. I'll give you an example here. LA is like 3.8 million people, 3.9 million people. That's just Los Angeles. Of that, there's 70,000 homeless people that live in there. That roughly works out to maybe almost 2%. Calgary is 4 million people, but it only has about 1,900 homeless people. That's 0.01 or that's 0.15%. That's a really strong indicator that we care about people here, that we try not to make the cracks that deep, that those that are marginalized won't fall that far down before we try our best to get them back up. And that's what I think is really special about Calgary, is that you can have so many different opinions, so many different walks of life centralized in one area that's absolutely beautiful. You got mountains, you got rivers, you got 4 proper seasons. You got Chinooks mixed into there too, which creates a little bit of chaos. But that's just the reality of living that close to the ocean, but not close enough to experience it on a daily basis, right? And having mountains as part of that scenario. And that's what I think where Calgary is just amazing, is that you have this perfect storm of natural beauty in terms of the environment that we live in and the people that live here with the right kind of resources. We have wind resources here, we have sun resources here, we have oil and gas resources here, but above all else, we have the human resource, the ability to think and then execute on those thoughts. And that's not just a Calgary thing, that's an Alberta thing, is that you can come here and you can have an idea and you can bring it to life. And that's why I think that this place is so special. I just think Calgary's has a little icing on the cake because you can see the mountains when you climb a hill here, right? That's a very peaceful thing for me as a person, that grounding, that there's this massive piece of something that's sitting there that's so much bigger than I am, that I can't even explain. Like some big piece of ice came through this land millions of years ago and carved it into what it is. That's very humbling. And that's why I think I like being here. That reminder right in front of my eyes in a physical realm allows me to have peace in who I am inside.
So cool, dude. It's this was a really special one for me. This is really cool. Like literally I just sat here and listened and I was like, wow. It's just, I'm looking forward to re-listening to this one because I think you're wired differently and it's really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if I can just say one thing in closing as well, of course. Too, like anybody that's listening to this podcast and has made it this far, first, great for
Don't worry,
the media side of things, right?
Yeah,
like if you made it this far, like thank you so much for tolerating what I've had to say and also understanding who I am as a person. One of two things I would really appreciate it if you were to do this. Reach out to the both of us. Reach out to the both of us to understand what it is that we're doing and allow us to open our doors to others. One thing that I can say about you that I don't think I can say about too many people, and I hold you in high regard only having met you today physically in person, is that you opened up this space for me to be able to share. I knew I was coming into here today to be able to share my thoughts. And that's a very rare opportunity in life. So I want to thank you for that. So you're special in my mind as well too. And I think I really appreciate what you're doing. And then on my side of the coin, I have this saying that I gave a friend: the only conversations that you regret are the conversations that you don't have. If you have a desire to talk to me, reach out to me. I don't care what it's about. I will have that conversation with you and it's on your time. So you choose what you want to talk about and I'm happy to engage with the sake of making this planet a better place and making the city that we live in the best city in the world.
Dude, I hope someone takes either one of us up on that because it's a wild offer, right? Like just to have the time to engage with somebody like you that's playing the space that you're playing in. I hope when it happens, you like send me a quick message, hey man, this happened. So that's a really cool offer. Yeah, absolutely. It's the one thing that we can't control. So you might as well try to organize it the best that you can. Right time is interesting. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Which, thanks for your time today. I know you're a busy dude, so to take the time on your schedule to do this means a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Likewise as well too. I really appreciate it. Cool, man. Thank you.